Most peasants in medieval times lived in mud, hunger, and fear. Yet some discovered a hidden path, knowledge that transformed ordinary farmers into wealthy merchants, and built power no sword could ever buy. They told us peasants lived miserable lives, dirty huts, empty stomachs, no future. But what if that wasn't the full story? What if some of the poorest villagers quietly built fortunes so massive that nobles envied them, that kings taxed them by name, and that entire towns whispered about their unbelievable rise? This is the forgotten truth of how ordinary people, farmers, merchants, even monks, climbed from the mud to medieval wealth. And these lessons still apply today. Let's begin. To survive the Middle Ages, you didn't just need strength, you needed strategy. And the first strategy was knowing opportunity hides where most people see suffering. In the 14th century, the Black Death killed nearly half of Europe. Horrific, yes. But in the chaos that followed, a strange thing happened. Labor became rare, painfully rare. And suddenly, humble farmhands could demand wages that once would have gotten them whipped for arrogance. In England, historical records show wages for workers nearly doubled within a generation. A man who once worked for bread could now buy land. A woman who once scrubbed floors could accumulate savings and even lend money to local farmers. One chronicle from Norfolk tells of a laborer's son who purchased abandoned fields, rented plows, and turned a plague-ravaged village into productive farmland. Years later, he owned more acres than the knight whose banner once flew above his father's hut. And here is the lesson. When the world collapses, most people panic. A few people prepare, and a tiny number quietly build empires from ruins. But not every path to medieval wealth was soaked in tragedy. Some were built on craft, community, and cleverness. Take the guild system. In medieval towns, guilds controlled entire industries: textiles, carpentry, metalwork, glassmaking, even baking. A poor boy who apprenticed under a master didn't just learn a trade, he gained a network, protection, and a path upward. In 1403, a young Florentine clothworker named Francesco da Tini began as a simple merchant runner. By mastering wool trade routes and reinvesting every coin, he later became known as the Merchant of Prato, with warehouses across the Mediterranean. His letters show an obsession. Spend little, earn honestly, grow slowly, but always grow. He died one of the richest commoners in Europe. And here's the surprising truth. Medieval success wasn't always about brute force or noble birth. It was about information and networks, just like today. But what about peasants who never left their village? Could they get rich too? Yes, and many did, through something people underestimate even now: niche skills. The world needed millers to grind grain, tanners for leather, smiths to forge nails and horseshoes, fletchers to craft arrows for war. Even the humble brewer, often a woman, controlled one of Europe's most valuable daily commodities: ale. Court records and tax rolls reveal something incredible. In many towns, millers and brewers earned more than some knights. One English widow in the 1200s, known only as Alice the Brewer, owned 3 brewing kettles, 2 malt houses, and paid tax equal to land-owning freemen. Why? Because she mastered a community need. And that's another medieval truth. The richest weren't always the strongest. They were the most useful. But let's step deeper. Some medieval millionaires weren't farmers or workers at all. They were thinkers, scribes, monks. Imagine a silent monastery, candles flickering, ink drying on parchment. It looks peaceful, even poor. Yet inside those walls, monks copied texts for nobles, kings, and scholars. Manuscripts took months to produce and could cost as much as a small house. The Abbey of Cluny in France didn't just pray. It managed vineyards, farmland, donations, and manuscripts. At its peak, it controlled more wealth than certain duchies. Knowledge wasn't just power, it was currency. And in that same world, There were hustlers too. People like Jacques Coeur of France, once a fur trader's son. He built shipping fleets, traded silver, supplied kings, and became so wealthy that nobles accused him of sorcery, because how else, they believed, could a commoner break the chains of fate? But here's the twist. Even as empires rose, some wealth was born in secrecy. Hidden smuggling networks for salt, so valuable it created the word salary. Illegal private mills competing with lord-owned ones, peasants quietly renting tools, buying and reselling wool, or pooling coins to graze sheep on common land. In medieval England, groups of villagers secretly invested together in sheep flocks and split the profits, one of the earliest forms of collective investment. They didn't have stock markets, they had trust, cooperation, and shared ambition. And let's not forget the women whose names history nearly erased. Women brewed beer, ran inns, made textiles, and even traded property in bustling cities like Lubeck and Bruges. In some Hanseatic League towns, widows continued their husbands' shipping businesses, commanding crews and managing finances. Property rolls in 14th century London list dozens of female landlords renting rooms to travelers. Success wasn't just a man's story. It simply wasn't written down for women. And what about those who started with nothing? No land, no guild, no inheritance. Many became pilgrims turned traders. Traveling to shrines like Santiago, Rome, or Canterbury, they exchanged goods across regions. Spices, wool, carved icons, wine. Some returned home wealthier than they left, part merchant, part explorer. The medieval world wasn't static. It was constantly shifting, opening cracks where the ambitious rose. So why don't we hear these stories? Because power protects its legends. Kings preferred the world to believe wealth came from divine right. Nobles preferred peasants to stay humble and ignorant, yet chroniclers left traces. Tax books recorded names of those who climbed too high to ignore. Monastic writings mentioned donors who began life in modest cottages. Merchant letters spoke of apprentices who became partners. And what do these forgotten lives teach us? That opportunity often looks like hardship, that wealth hides in service to others, that knowledge, networks, and niche skills beat brute force and blind luck, and that history remembers kings, but fortune favors builders. If a serf could buy land in the age of plague, if a cloth boy could dominate Mediterranean trade, if widows could command ships and own property, if monks could turn ink into gold, what's stopping any of us today? The medieval world may be gone, but its lessons remain as sharp as a blacksmith's blade. Adapt when the world breaks. Learn what others ignore. Build value, not excuses. And never believe fate is final. Your story is still being written, just as theirs was, centuries ago. And if you enjoyed uncovering the forgotten truths of history, subscribe for more untold stories, where legends are questioned, truths buried by time are unearthed, and the past whispers secrets that can still change your future. History never dies. It only waits to be rediscovered.